The Death of Superman is the new DC animated movie. Now, the first thing I want to say is this is going to be a long review, so if you're not into that, then just turn it off. So this movie is based off the storyline in the 90s, The Death of Superman. It was a crossover event. Let's be honest, The Death of Superman is a very iconic moment for that comic book character's history. However, it's not the best. Honestly, the writers sat down and jokingly said, what if we kill off Superman for a stunt? And they did. So literally the story, if you're unfamiliar, is Doomsday is a rampaging fight monster attached to an asteroid. He falls to Earth, fights the Justice League International, defeats them, and then Superman engages in Doomsday in a brutal fist fight until they both pass out and die. So it's not really the most complex or entertaining story. It is very famous. A lot of people know about the death of Superman, how he died at the hands of Doomsday. There was even a video game. There was a couple of, it's been in countless media. In fact, the first ever DC animated movie was a version of Superman Doomsday. So this is trying to be a more sort of faithful to the comic. So this movie it's not really a standalone. It's the first part of a two-part movie. The second part would be Reign of the Superman, The Return of Superman. This movie is just about the fighting Doomsday. And I gotta say that the movie fails in a lot of areas. First off, the tonal shifts. The Death of Superman is a 90s story. It's not very well written, in my opinion. It's basically just a giant monster fights Superman and kills him. So you can't just do that in a comic book movie or even an animated movie because there's not enough material. So you'd have to add a few things here and there. But the movie also has to keep in continuity with the New 52 because they decided that everything after the movie Justice League War is in continuity with each other. So all the characters are sort of modern day, however the story is very 90s. And then they also throw in a lot of elements that are from the new live action movies. So I'll get into that later. But basically, the first 45 minutes to an hour is mostly relationship troubles with Superman. In this movie, he's dating Lois Lane as Clark Kent, but she doesn't know of his secret identity. He's grappling to terms with dropping the bomb on her like that. He's not sure if that would be fair and if he wants to let her in. And there's also Doomsday lands in the water, kills some Atlanteans first, and then makes his way to land and starts killing everything that moves. It's not very scary, watching a giant creature like Doomsday kill campers. Jason Voorhees can do that too. I mean, they should have brought in the Justice League International as a nice homage, but they just didn't do that. So you get to watch Doomsday kill campers and then police officers, and it's not really exciting. It's not very foreboding. It's not very suspenseful. And then they also throw in a lot of gratuitous cameos because the next movie is going to be The Reign of the Supermen. So they have cameos from Hank Henshaw as well as John Henry Irons and Superboy. So most of the movie it feels like it's trying to buy time until the big finale in which Superman has to fight Doomsday. And even the big finale with Doomsday isn't even as good as the one from Superman Doomsday, the movie. So I think, okay, let's talk about Doomsday though. Doomsday has a lot of problems. First off, I don't like the fact that he has pupils because it sort of gives him more personality. I like the whole dead-eyed look, so that was a character design flaw I didn't like. Also, Doomsday, he seems to adopt a lot of powers from the live-action movie Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. He does the sort of evolving in mid-battle, which is something in the movie, as well as develop heat vision for no real reason. But in Batman v Superman, the reason why Doomsday adopted heat vision was because he was Zod's body. In this animated movie, it makes no sense for him to just have heat vision for no real reason. And the third thing is that they made him mindless, but only when it was convenient to the plot. In the original movie Superman Doomsday, he would go after anything that moves. So he kills a deer in the forest, moves onto a car on the highway, goes after a bullet train, and just trying to show how mindless he really is. He'll go after anything that moves. In this movie, he seems to punch and kill things, but then sometimes leaves them alive if he feels like it. Like he rips Cyborg's arm off, but he doesn't continue pummeling Cyborg. However, he tries to kill Wonder Woman after fighting her. So the movie, the creature is, supposed to be mindless. He's supposed to try to destroy everything that moves, but why does he go after people that are passed out after fighting? Why is he? It doesn't really make sense, really. Another thing is that the movie sort of has a lot of filler. The opening sequence has Superman fighting Intergang, and he later has a training montage with Wonder Woman, but it sort of feels like sort of placement action. And then the sort of, before the big finale with Superman versus Doomsday, Doomsday fights the Justice League, but only half of them. The other half are sort of done as an afterthought. They don't show it. They just show them all passed out. I thought that was a really big wasted opportunity. If the movie wanted to have a little bit better pacing, it should have tried to spread out the action throughout the entire movie rather than just have it all happen at the end. And so let's go over some of the things that could have made this movie a lot better. The emotional stuff with Superman and Lois Lane, keep that. That was fine, because there's this really tender emotional part at the end of the movie which makes it probably one of the better adaptations of the death of Superman. If they wanted to sort of clear things up and make it a little bit better paced, I would have had Doomsday land immediately. Lex Luthor is in this movie too much. Cut him out completely. Or just have him track Doomsday. As soon as Doomsday lands, he shouldn't land in the water. He should land on Earth, and he should fight the Justice League International, because they're like a smaller team. They're not as powerful, but it'd be more suspenseful to see Doomsday crush something, you know, at least that has a chance of defeating him a little bit, rather than, you know, campers and policemen. And then the Justice League International contact the Justice League, and that's how they find out. As Doomsday works his way towards Metropolis, you can have all the relationships stuff happen. And they should have had a protracted fight with Justice League and Doomsday. Flash, Green Lantern, and Hawkman have a pretty decent fight with Doomsday, but they sort of gloss over all the other members and sort of just show them the aftermath. Don't do that. I would have liked to see the entire Justice League and Shazam. Shazam's missing from this movie, but he was in Justice League War. He should have been there, and they should have used the same tactics they used on Darkseid, because Superman wasn't present for the Darkseid fight, and it would have been an interesting throwback to the continuity of the first movie where they're trying to stay in continuity. After Doomsday defeats the entire Justice League without Superman, he can show up and he can have that final battle. And Lex Luthor wouldn't just join in at the end there. So this movie definitely had a lot of problems. I felt the action wasn't up to par with what we've seen before. Even Superman fighting Doomsday in the Justice League animated show and Unlimited, as well as Superman Doomsday. This would be like the fourth time he's fought Doomsday animated form. He's fought Doomsday like 10 times in the comics ever since the death of Superman. However, this movie just has really bad pacing problems for the first half, and then the action is fine. The voice acting is okay. Don't like the voice acting for Lex Luthor. Terrible choice. Rainn Wilson, I love him in The Office, but he's not a very good choice for Lex Luthor. So this movie has bad pacing. The action isn't anything amazing. It should have adopted more of a sort of tone of a disaster film, you know, a foreboding, like, you know, this creature is coming and it won't stop. But it doesn't really do that. It just sort of throws him in there. And another thing I didn't like is that Superman, when he fights Doomsday, he doesn't use any tactics at all. In the original comic source material, they just punch each other. But I would have liked to see Superman do other stuff, like use freeze breath and try to freeze him, or try to throw him into space, or do something else other than just punch Doomsday, because he should have noticed that after the first few minutes of fighting him that he can't take him physically. He has to get a little bit smart, but they don't do that. And there's a scene where Superman lifts Doomsday into the air, and I thought he was going to go for that, but then he tries to punch him to the earth. And just really made Superman sort of more of a dull, brutal character, and more of a punching person, which I didn't like, because Superman is not just about raw strength. He's about technique and other things like that in the comics. So I didn't like how they sort of dumbed down Superman into like a punching guy. Other than that, the animation's fine. Voice acting's okay except for Lex Luthor. The movie just doesn't really hit all the right notes, really. I mean, in terms of pacing, in terms of action. Emotion-wise, yes, but this was a big disappointment for me, so I give The Death of Superman a 6 out of 10.